Hey guys, Scary Juju here. Make sure to like and subscribe and help us reach 200 subs. Enjoy. I can't tell you who I am. And I can't tell you the name of the program. But what I can tell you is that if what they say is true, we're in trouble. Now, we didn't make contact in the way you think we would. We didn't beam out an episode of The Office towards Andromeda and hear back from alien critics. And we definitely didn't meet them face to face. We found another way to communicate. Something apparently ancient humans had figured out as well. There are countless dilapidated ancient structures around the world. And some of them, not all, but some, were communication arrays. At least a handful on each continent. I'm sure you'll be able to think of a few after I describe what we did. We've been working on this technology for a while. There has been a long-standing theory that sound has a much larger part in the universe than just being random vibrations. That the universe is simply a bunch of vibrations and sound. And if you find a way to manipulate those vibrations properly, you could do things that seem impossible. We proved that yesterday. By creating an extremely precise echo chamber and playing certain frequencies into it at precisely the right volumes and the exact right timings, we broke some sort of barrier. Nothing really happened, visually at least. We have run countless tests like these with tiny, minute differences, and this one seemed pretty mundane. There was a slight unnatural thrumming. The glass between us and the echo chamber shook in regular intervals as we were playing a bass-heavy song too loudly. The first thing that tipped us off that something was happening was that once we turned the speakers off, the thrumming didn't stop. My 3 co-workers and I could all feel this thrumming in our chest still, kinda like being next to a very loud drum. We talked for a moment before we all fell silent. There was something else now. It wasn't a voice. It was some sort of intelligent vibration. I can't explain it. It was like a voice was inside my chest, but it wasn't speaking. I could just feel what it was saying. My cohorts and I debated on the exact wording afterwards, but we all agreed on the overall messages each time. Like I said, they weren't really talking, so I'll do my best to phrase it in ways that get across what they said, in the way they said it. Whoa, you guys are back? Is what I felt in my chest. My colleagues and I stared at each other in utter confusion. One of them spoke up. "Hello?" he asked hesitantly. There was a silence for a moment, before the thrumming spoke back. "I think I have it set right now. Say that again?" "Hello?" I repeated back to it in place of the other scientist. "Yep, there it is," he said quickly. "You guys figured it out again. That's crazy," it exclaimed. This wasn't what I was thinking the first human-alien conversation was going to go. I wasn't even sure that this was first contact at this point though. "Who is this? What is this?" I asked loudly into the open air of our control room. "I'm not sure if I'm allowed to give you details like who we are, but what this is the ultimate form of communication in our universe. Your ancestors figured it out briefly too." With some quick deduction on how it was wording things, I think each of us figured out what we were talking to was alien in origin around the same time. "Where are you from?" I asked. "You have to be close. Hell, with the way we were talking back and forth, they had to be really close. It takes communication to Mars a few minutes to get there, just because that's as fast as light is. If we were talking this quickly back and forth, they basically had to be on Earth." "I guess you wouldn't know. We didn't tell your ancestors. We didn't think they get it. Let me do some math real quick. It was about a minute before it spoke again. What you see as your observable universe, that's not the whole universe. Not even close. Multiply that by about 15, and that's about how far we are away. And there's a lot past that. We all looked at each other. It was speaking utter bullshit to us now. That was impossible. We'd never be able to communicate. Ever. Physically impossible. We explained that to the chest voice, and we were met by an equal level of confusion. Why are you still using light as a yardstick? It asked incredulously. Suddenly, its voice grew slightly dire. You're still not advanced enough. You don't even know. Know what? One of my friends asked. You are dead center in the life abyss. There is no life on any planet around you for more than 10 of your observable universes around you in any direction. It's a universal mystery how you're even alive. It spoke grimly. Never in my life had I felt smaller, more insignificant, and more alone. It continued. And there is a reason for that. An earnest and tangible feeling of dread took over the control room. There is a reason for that. It reverberated through my entire body as the vibration spoke. But then, silence. No one in the control room spoke a word. We barely even looked at each other. The silence continued for over a minute that felt like a day. What's the reason? Dave, the senior scientist on hand, finally spoke. He had chosen a serious and somber tone in an endless list of choices on how to react. If you value your lives, if you value the lives of every living thing on your planet, never use this form of communication ever again. It shook into our chests. That one felt less welcoming. It felt like a dire warning. We felt the tingling, shaking force leaving our chests. It just simply faded away, like how when a chord of a guitar is plucked. We looked now to one another. What was the play? Forge on bravely into the void in the name of science and play the frequencies again? Or take an alien warning and stop? We didn't get to make that decision. Our program is monitored closely by the US military. A voice came I didn't recognize on over the intercom. Don't touch anything, folks. We're gonna come in and take a look at a few things. Dave took charge. We were clearly panicked at what we had experienced, but he seemed to have the most level head. All we can do now is tell the truth, he reasoned, just as the door to the control room was opened. The next hour or so was a blur. I was first questioned by my boss as to what he just watched over his monitor. What he saw was a handful of his employees standing in a circle and periodically yelling nonsense at no one in particular. I took Dave's advice to heart and told him as clearly as I could what happened. I think I was the first he talked to. He wasn't buying anything I said. Slowly, I was joined by the rest of the team, one by one, and they recounted pretty much exactly what I just said. So what they knew was that we had all started a test, and then stood around in a circle, and then all came up with the same story. It started to get more believable. We were each rushed to individual physical exams, and then into a more in-depth interview with someone from the military. The exam seemed to go well. I never heard back from them. The interview seemed to be going good as well. I had basically recounted what I said to my boss, word for word, just this time on tape, and in front of some guy in an army uniform. Just when things seemed to be wrapping up, the door to our small interviewing office opened behind me. "Sir, we need you back down the hall immediately." A woman in army fatigues spoke quickly before rushing back down the hallway. I looked back to the man interviewing me but he was already halfway out the door before I could say anything. I was sitting there for a few minutes. I had time to think. Was I crazy if I believed whatever the thing in my chest was telling me? Everything it said sounded impossible, but none of it felt like it was a lie. Even though I could only feel what it was saying, I could feel its excitement when we first made contact. I could feel the desperation in it as it told us to never contact it again. What was important though, nothing felt like a lie. I noticed that my interviewer had been taking notes as we spoke. Now that I had been left alone for a few minutes, I thought, what was the harm in taking a peek? I slowly reached over the table and flipped his papers over. They read, Unknown Frequency Report, Subject, my name. Significant physical changes to the subject since his last physical 6 months ago according to the base physician after exposure to the frequencies in this report. No cosmic changes or complaints of pain or unease. Describes vibrations in chest. Describes hearing voices after being exposed to the frequencies. No history of mental illness. Frequencies that cause mental illness? Breaks with reality? Hallucinations? That's as far as he got before he was interrupted. I slid the papers back across the table and sat back in my chair. All of us had described the same thing. But were they thinking we were all just crazy? It warned us, and the more I thought about it, I wanted to take that warning to heart. I sat up starkly. She said, down the hall. The control room was down the hall. With how they rushed us out of there, we didn't even have a chance to turn the machinery off. We didn't even turn a single dial in our stunned states. All they had to do was press a button and the vibrations would play again. Shit. I exploded out of my seat, through the door and down the hall. I ripped the door of the control room open to all of the military officers and a few more scientists standing there in disbelief. I hadn't even heard the vibrations again, but I could hear the voice on the other side. And now, so could they. I just told you to never use this again. It thundered in my chest. A few of the older men in the room grabbed at their chests in pain. 1 second, I need to check something. It spoke again angrily. You could have gotten away with it just using it once. Twice was too much. His sentence ended in a twinge of fear. He heard you. He's listening right now. And he's coming. I don't work for NASA. I'm a lowly office tech at a company affiliated with NASA. We store data off-site mostly concerning their many secret unmanned missions to the moon, including the countless ones that took place in between the Apollo launches. There are regular landings, even today. As you can imagine, we're not on the books. Still, we are a necessary facet of the Space Administration's delicate infrastructure. Now that you're up to speed with where I work, I can tell you about the room. Room 371 to be precise. The Overseer's office. It always had an air of mystery about it. I and other staff members had been inside before, tasked with leaving behind flash drives filled with sensitive information for the Overseer to upload to our database. You see, the sole computer in that room is an offline archive containing almost every one of NASA's dirty little secrets. Stuff that we can't risk getting out in the event of a data breach. If anyone were to hack our online mainframe, they would only find decoy files, outlying pieces of data that have already been in the public's eye. Most of the information I dealt with amounted to mundane statistical analyses. The real interesting, controversial stuff was sent directly to the overseer, bypassing the prying eyes of entry-level employment. That brings us to yesterday. It was a normal drop-off assignment. Bring the flashlight to room 371, leave it on the desk, and shut the door on your way out. I had done it countless times before. This time, however, was a little different. After placing the drive on the desk, I noticed a faint glow on the wall behind it. The computer was on. This was strange. It was always shut down by the overseer after a data dump. The only times I had ever seen it turned on were days when he was in there still working. I admit it, my curiosity got the better of me. With a slight spike in adrenaline, I walked around the desk and sat at the chair, ready to take back at least one mystery to the hive mind on the main floor. The convenience in this moment cannot be understated. I later discovered that the overseer was sick and had rushed to the bathroom, where he remained for at least 40 minutes. Not only was the computer on, but it was unlocked. Even our personal workstations required a series of passwords that changed daily. Passwords we had to spend the first 10 minutes of any given workday decrypting. This was the one and only chance I had to placate my curiosity and dig for the buried treasures of NASA. I knew there just had to be something in the confines of our database that would elicit a gasp or mouth drop. Something I will remember for the rest of my years. In settling in at the desk, my heart pounding at the thought of the overseer's return, I noticed the computer was calibrated just like the rest of our PCs. Because of this, I knew just what folders to open and what digital stones to turn on my hunt for secrets. Most files were your run-of-the-mill storage vessels, data pertaining to the boring truths of the trade, statistics and physics predictions. After a few minutes of searching, I almost called it quits, but one document caught my eye. It was titled Project Burial at Sea. This was what I wanted. A classified NASA project, never before released to the public. In this moment, secrets were revealed to me. Ones I soon wished I had never unearthed it. As is common with these types of documents, the jargon was very straightforward and low on description. As such, I had to piece together bits of information to form a clear picture of the proposal and subsequent missions that apparently started at the turn of our current century. What I discovered did indeed elicit a gasp. It also made my skin crawl. Project Burial at Sea was, ironically enough, a failsafe against information leaks. It implemented the pre-existing infrastructure of NASA's unmanned missions to dispose of cracks in the system. That is, individuals likely to come clean about privileged information. Yes, you heard right. Individuals. NASA was killing off would-be whistleblowers to protect their assets. The initial proposal called for sending the bodies into deep space, but too many unknown variables presented themselves. If even one probe was knocked back to Earth by an asteroid or unforeseen space event, the entire operation would be done for, especially if it landed in enemy territory. At that point, another country could use it to blackmail our government for aid and financial gain. Burying the bodies on the moon prevented this and eliminated all potential evidence tying anyone to the crime. The people who vanished made up a very small portion of NASA, so the ratio of missing persons in relation to their workforce was barely disrupted, deflecting any potential suspicion. After a rigorous sterilization procedure, the bodies are stuffed into the hollow spaces of the previously unmanned probes. Once they reach the lunar surface, they are collected by rovers, and buried in the craters of a specific section of the moon's dark side. In other words, mass graves. The rovers later collect samples to determine the long-term effects of the soil on human decomposition. This was not the purpose of the project, just an added benefit. I was floored. This document was not what I expected. I couldn't believe this sort of thing would happen in our country, and at NASA of all places, an organization I was involved with. After closing the file and navigating back to the home screen, I left room 371 and shut the door. My worldview shattered. Upon returning to my workstation, my coworker Bill questioned me. "Jack, where were you? Did you hear the overseer ratching in the bathroom? Poor guy has that stomach bug that's been going around." I politely nodded, but offered no response to the initial query, still shaken. Bill buried his face back in his work. Eventually, the overseer returned, the sound of room 371's creaky iron door slamming shut behind him as he resumed work at his desk. Beads of sweat formed above my brow as I wondered if he would notice something amiss and know I perused the archive. My heart began racing as the paranoia took hold. I had to tell someone about my discovery. Perhaps I misinterpreted the information. Maybe Bill could put my mind at ease. He was a nice guy, not the type to break a promise or betray his fellow worker. "Bill," I whispered, "have you heard anything about NASA sending corpses to the moon?" He stared at me a moment, an overly serious expression painted across his face. And then he laughed. "Jack, you are a card. Where do you come up with this stuff anyway? You should write a book." Without so much as a sound to alert his arrival, the overseer put his hand on my shoulder. I nearly jumped out of my skin. "Jack, I've been meaning to talk to you. A big promotion in the works. Meet me in my office in 10 minutes. With that, he loosened his grip and traveled back to room 371. My eyes widened and my heart sank. Bill noticed something was wrong. "What's wrong, Jack? You look as though you've seen a ghost. Promotions are a big deal around here. Only one every few months or so. Lisa was promoted last year and went on to supervise one of the unmanned probe launches. Haven't heard from her since." I turned to Bill and met his gaze. "Bill, it's been nice working with you." He smiled before turning back to his computer. "You too, Jack." 10 torturous minutes came and went. I hesitantly made my way to room 371 and slowly opened the door. The overseer gestured for me to come in. "Have a seat, Jack, and close the door." I unwillingly obliged. The thought of making a run for it crossed my mind, but I knew the security detail at the front gate would stop me. Drawing attention to myself would only serve to expedite my demise. "So, what is this about?" I asked, my breathing now labored and sporadic. "Like I said before, it's a promotion. NASA is recruiting from its affiliate outfits to supervise some of their unmanned launches. You've been selected." I tilted my head in disbelief. "But sir, why me? I haven't done anything to warrant such a promotion, to my knowledge." He grinned. "That's where you're wrong, Jack. We've been watching you. We know what you did. You can't deny it any longer." With a wicked smile, he stood up from his desk and walked over to me, his arms outstretched in my direction. His shadow covered the entire room, or at least it seemed that way in the moment. Without realizing it, I had backed myself into the corner, almost cowering in fear. That's when the door opened and my coworkers flooded the room. "Surprise!" I stood upright, shocked. "What's going on?" Bill responded. "Don't you know what day it is, Jack?" The overseer pointed at his wall calendar. It was September 18th, which according to them was my hire date. It all made sense now. It was a ruse, a practical joke at my expense. The overseer sometimes did this on workplace anniversaries, but not for many years at this point, and never to this elaborate extent. I didn't even realize what day it was until they pointed it out. "Did you really think I would leave my computer on, unattended?" Bill chimed in. "Bodies can't even decompose on the moon, Jack. There's no air." They both let out hearty laughs. I laughed too, thoroughly relieved. The rest of the afternoon was nice. After all was said and done, we returned to work, invigorated by the positive surge of energy and morale. After finishing my leftover tasks, I left with a smile on my face, happy to be Earthside, alive and well. This mood would follow me to the whole way home. But it wasn't alone. When I parked in my driveway, someone pulled in behind me. The overseer stepped out of the car and greeted me with a friendly wave. "Jack, can we talk?" House calls were unorthodox in our line of work, but not unheard of. "Of course, Coulter. Please come in." He followed me inside and joined me in the living room. I sat down, but he paced at the fireplace, looking over my family photos on the mantle. "You know, what Bill said was true. Bodies don't decompose on the moon. That bit was added by NASA. They put falsehoods in all of their classified documents. It's another failsafe, a detail they can point to in the event of a leak to make it seem illegitimate." I was utterly confused. "I'm not sure I follow. What are you getting at exactly?" He turned to me, a stern look painted across his face. "It's all real, Jack. The dead bodies, the craters, everything." I chuckled. Come on, Coulter. The joke's over. No need to drag it out." He wasn't laughing. "This is no joke. You were hired in July, not September. I sent out a last-minute memo to everyone in an attempt to avert your suspicion. Here, we can discuss things privately." Very funny. You're forgetting about my wife and daughter." A smirk touched the side of his cheek. He tossed me an envelope. Inside were photos of my wife picking up our daughter from school. My heart sank. "What the hell is this, Coulter? Are you following my family around?" "We've intercepted them. Let's just say they'll be late getting home tonight." The gravity of the situation was beginning to sink in. If everything I saw was indeed real, then I was now a target. I would soon become the next NASA casualty buried at sea. If I didn't escape and get help, Charlotte and Leslie would never be saved. My eyes darted for the door. Coulter noticed. "I wouldn't run if I were you. I didn't come alone." My blood boiling, I was tempted to lash out in anger. "Don't worry, they're safe." I remained silent, but livid. There are things in the universe you can't begin to understand. Things not only above your pay grade, but above your understanding. Things human words could never hope to describe. "Human?" I asked, perplexed by the wording. "Yes, Jack. Let me show you." What happened next was enough to put my mouth on the floor. Using his right hand in a single circular motion in the air, Coulter opened up a portal. A fucking portal. One that seemed to connect my living room to the moon. I could even see Earth off in the distance. "What in God's name is that?" I shouted. "Come on, Jack. Get a closer look." As his hostage, I had no choice but to humor his demands. Upon stepping up to the void, still frazzled, I saw it. A crater filled to the brim with corpses. Why are you showing me this? I asked in a shaky voice. Just watch, Jack. I looked back to the scene and noticed something at the edge of the crater. 3 shadowy figures, far too tall to be human. They extended their arms, and a glow rained down from the space above the crater. The corpses, they moved. I watched in horror as the bodies were reanimated. But these were not living things. They were shells controlled by a puppeteer, bent to its sinister will. The 3 shadows became one and formed an archway, a blinding brightness pouring out from within. One by one, and the corpses walked into the light until finally the crater was emptied. Then the light dissipated, and the shadows spun in unison, taking off at great speed into the abyss of deep space. With another wave of his arm, Coulter closed the portal. I was speechless. You see, Jack, Project Burial at Sea is more than a safety measure. It's a necessary sacrifice to them. So, all those bodies? I asked. No, only some were would-be whistleblowers. The rest, John and Jane Does, left at morgues across the country with no relatives to claim them. Where did they take them? I asked. To the place where they live. There, they are forced to build, stuck in the space between life and death for an eternity. Slaves of an alien race. It's a truly terrible fate. We would all be there right now, if not for the deal we struck back in 1947. These creatures don't bode well in our atmosphere. We placate their every need to keep them from developing a technology capable of mitigating the effect our air has on their bodies and spacecraft. I couldn't believe it. Everything I knew up to that point was a lie. Coulter walked to the door. I like you, Jack. That's why I'm telling you all of this. I want you to keep on. You're a good man, a good worker. If you don't want to end up like the poor souls up on that hunk of space rock, you'll keep your mouth shut. I heard a car pull in outside. Looks like your wife and daughter are home. We just took them out for ice cream, before closing the door on his way out. The overseer turned back with a smile. See you on Monday, Jack.